Hi friends, I hope that you are well. I hope you've had a good week. So this coming Thursday on May 29, there's going to be a big celebration in Zurich, Switzerland to commemorate the Anabaptist movement 500-year anniversary. And actually some of our people, Larry and Laura, are going to be in Zurich on Thursday for this celebration. So today I want to do something a little bit different. I want to talk about our Anabaptist roots and our core values as Anabaptists. You probably know, but don't want to take for granted, that our church, Reunion, is part of the BIC, Be in Christ Church of Canada, and BIC is part of the Anabaptist movement, which has, Mennonites are our cousins, and so we're in that movement. And so today, like I said, I want to talk a little bit about our history and our core values. Okay, let's begin with a bit of church history. In the 500, 600, 700 years ago, in 1400s, 1500s, the Roman Catholic Church had become the dominant force in the kind of religious world. And in the year 1517, a little over 500 years ago, was the Protestant Reformation, where Martin Luther took exception to the Catholic Church because he didn't think that they were living out a New Testament, the kind of Christianity we read about in the New Testament. And so Martin Luther kind of branched off and started what we call the Protestant Reformation, which is what many churches are part of today. About 8 years after the Protestant Reformation, in 1525, there was 500 years ago this year, there was a small group of people who took exception to the Protestant Reformation because they felt it did not go far enough in returning to New Testament Christianity. And one of the main issues they took exception was baptism, infant baptism. At the time, both the Roman Catholic Church and the New Protestant Church still practiced infant baptism. But this small group of people, who would later become known as Anabaptists, read in the Bible, New Testament, John the Baptist baptizing in the Jordan River, and so they practiced adult baptism, or people who were old enough to make a profession of faith in Christ were baptized by what we call immersion, being immersed in the water instead of just sprinkling. And so on let me get the date right, January 21st, 1525, there were 3 men who were baptized in a private home: Felix Mons, Conrad Grabel, and George Blowrock. And so, today we go, okay, whatever, they took exception, they just didn't believe in infant baptism, so they believed in adult baptism by immersion, so what's the big deal, right? But at the time, this was a really, really big deal. In fact, the Roman Catholic Church and the Protestant churches deemed this as heresy. They deemed it as illegal, and get this, it was punishable by death. So last summer we had a baptism service in Yananami's pool, and nobody was sentenced to death, right, because of being baptized. But in 1525, people were sentenced to death because they were baptized by immersion. And so 2 years after this happened in 1525, in 1527, one of the guys who was baptized, Felix Mons, was found guilty of heresy, and he was bound and put into a boat in Zurich, Switzerland. They pushed the boat, rowed the boat or whatever, out to the middle of the river, and he was pushed into the river and left to drown. And so he was executed by drowning. And it was no mistake and no coincidence that he was executed by drowning, because they mockingly called it the third baptism. The third baptism. So Felix Mons was baptized as a baby, under the Roman Catholic Church. Then he was baptized a second time in the Anabaptists, and then he died by what they called a third baptism. And so this martyrdom of Felix Mons started off a wide-scale persecution against this new group of Anabaptists. So Anabaptists, let me just pause here quickly. Anabaptist was a derogatory term for re-baptism. Anabaptist, re-baptism, okay? And so this sparked a wide-scale persecution of this new group of Anabaptists. And over the next few years, there were thousands of people who were martyred, who were killed because of their belief. They were drowned, just like Felix Mons was. Some were beheaded, some were burned at the stake, some were thrown into prison and tortured. Others had their belongings and their homes confiscated and left families to live in destitute poverty. And some were actually branded like you would brand a cow with a hot metal iron. Some were physically branded so that everybody in the community would know that, oh, those are the people who believe in adult baptism, right? And again, it's hard for us to understand, like, wait, like most churches, many churches practice adult baptism by immersion. It's just the way that it is, right? But in those early days, it was considered heresy by churches that today now practice adult baptism, by immersion. And so this persecution, you would think that in a small little group of people who are brand new to this way, hold on, I'm going to pause the video for a second. By the magic of video editing, a glass of water has appeared. So there were this tremendous persecution, and you would think that this persecution would scare people away from these beliefs, but it only galvanized, it strengthened their commitment to follow Jesus in every way. And a couple things that really were strengthened through this time was these Anabaptists believed in non-violent response to violence. So they took seriously the words of Jesus, "Blessed are the peacemakers." And they also took serious the words of Jesus when he said, "Love your enemy," right? And so there's this famous story of a guy called Dirk Willems. And Dirk Willems was an Anabaptist, and he was found, he was thrown into prison because of his heretical beliefs. And Dirk Willems actually escaped from prison. He was running away from the prison, and there was a prison guard who was chasing him. Dirk Willems ran across, it was the winter time, and he ran across a frozen river, and Dirk Willems got across the river, but the prison guard fell through the river and was being pulled under by the current. And so the prison guard, as he was drowning and struggling for his life, he called out desperately for help. So Dirk Willems had a choice to make. He could keep on going and gain his freedom and let the guy die, or he could turn around and save the prison guard's life. So he turned around and he saved the prison guard's life, pulled him out of the river and saved his life. To which immediately the prison guard seized Dirk Willem and took him back to prison. Later that same year, Dirk Willems was convicted of heresy, and he was burned at the stake. And so this story has become famous in the Anabaptist world because it summarizes, it captures the essence of loving your enemies, loving people, and a nonviolent response, like he saved the life of the person who was trying to harm him. So over the years, the Anabaptist movement has gathered around a few different core values. And there's this book. I'm actually, if you receive our weekly email, I'm going to put a link for this free book. It's a short little book. It's an easy read, and it's called "What is an Anabaptist Christian?" And in this book, there's a quote here that says, "Being a Christian from an Anabaptist perspective is a combination of believing in Jesus, belonging to community, and behaving in a reconciling way. Believing in Jesus, belonging to community, and behaving in a reconciling way. So the three key words are Jesus, community, and reconciliation. So for a couple of minutes, let me just talk about these three core values that really summarize what we're all about, in our Reunion community. The first core value is that Jesus is the center of our faith. Jesus is the center of our faith. And so in our church community at Reunion, we put a lot of value in Hebrews chapter 2, verse 12. The NIV, New International Version, says, "Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith." And so we put a lot of emphasis. You hear us talk a lot about Jesus for a reason. One, because he's, kind of important. But we, as Anabaptist Christians, we really try to model our lives. That's why in our Reunion core values, we say that we are apprentices. We are students of Jesus. And we really try to learn from Jesus and actually model our lives after the life of Jesus, right? Okay, so first, Jesus is the center of our faith. Second, community is the center of our life. Going back 500 years ago, this severe persecution really galvanized the community in this Anabaptist group, right? When your home is stolen from you and all of your goods and all of your money is taken from you, then what are you going to do, right? You have to lean on your community of brothers and sisters, right? And this really galvanized this aspect of community, brothers. And that used to be a big part of the language in fact, our church denomination used to be called the Brethren in Christ. We moved away from that in recent years because of patriarchal language kind of thing. But, brethren and sisterin in Christ, we are brothers and sisters. And so we put a high degree of value on this idea of community. And we take seriously Acts 2:42, excuse me again, that says that all believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and the sharing of meals, including the Lord's Supper and to prayer. And then verse 43, a deep sense of awe came over them, and all the apostles performed many miraculous signs and wonders. And then look at verse 44. And all the believers met together in one place and shared everything they had. Friends, can I just say that in our North American culture today, whether we realize it or not, our culture is very, very individualistic. And I think we don't understand how individualistic our culture is because it's just the water that we swim in, right? We take it for granted. We just think that it's normal. But can I suggest that our individualistic culture is not normal? In many different cultures around the world, they're very familial, and very community-oriented. And our North American culture is different in that way. And in fact, our North American culture is anti-biblical in this way, that we just think about ourselves. We all live in our little homes. We pull into our garage, close the garage door behind us, and watch Netflix, right? We live in our own little bubble. And this is not the way of Jesus. This is not the way of the New Testament church. And so anyways, so in our Anabaptist tradition, we at least give language to the value of community. I'm not sure how well we really live that, but we try at least, okay? So first of all, Jesus, the center of our life, community, Jesus, center of our faith, community, center of our life, and then third, reconciliation is the center of our work. Can I just say really quickly that I think that this small group of Anabaptist believers responded to violence with nonviolence. But it would have been really, really easy for them to respond to violence with violence. Like if you steal my home and you kill my brother, then my natural reaction is going to want to fight back, right? To defend to defend my home and everything. But they responded to violence with non-violence, just like Dirk Willems. And so they took very seriously this idea of reconciliation, both horizontal reconciliation, people to people, and vertical reconciliation, people to God. So the early Anabaptists and we today take seriously the words of Jesus in Matthew 5:9, God blesses those who work for peace, and God blesses, and loving our neighbors, right? So this idea of finding reconciliation, peace between our brothers and sisters, no matter if they have different views and different way of life, right? And we talked about that last week. And then finally, they took seriously the call to vertical reconciliation, calling others to be reunited with God. And they took seriously 2 Corinthians 5, verses 18 to 21. It says, all this is a gift from God who brought us back to himself through Christ. And listen, and God has given us this task of reconciling people to him. God has given us this task of calling people who are far from God to being reconciled to God. And then skipping down a little bit in verse 19, he gave us this wonderful message of reconciliation. So we are Christ's ambassadors. Now listen, God is making his appeal through us. We speak for Christ when we plead, come back to God. And so we would put a high degree of value on being reconciled with other human beings, finding a third way and not being so polarized. Again, we talked about that last week. But also we put a high value on calling people who are far from God to enjoy, to come into a beautiful new relationship with Jesus. Okay? So on Sunday, we'll have a conversation around these values, and I'm looking forward to it. Okay, my time is up, so I need to go and let you go. So I hope you have a fantastic week. God bless you, friends.